I've done a lot of work on this channel to try to prove the existence of God, and when people hear that, they'll often ask me a question. They'll say, Thomas, why do you, as a Catholic, as a Christian, have any interest in trying to prove that God exists? After all, don't you believe as a Christian that it's a matter of faith that God exists? And if you prove that God exists, doesn't that not leave room for faith anymore? Wouldn't it be better to just say that we can't prove that God exists, so it's just a question of faith? And this is a good question, so I'm going to answer it in this video. But in order to do that, I have to start by making a super important clarification about what faith is. You see, I think a lot of people assume that the word faith refers to a belief that someone holds without evidence, or sometimes an even more radical version, a belief that someone holds in spite of evidence to the contrary. But the fact is that that is just not the historic Christian understanding of what faith refers to. But I can see why people might get tripped up about this, because one of the most famous biblical passages on faith, Hebrews chapter 11, begins by defining faith as the realization of what is hoped for and evidence of things not seen, which, at least on the surface, could be read to imply that faith involves some kind of belief without evidence. But I think you need to read that line from Hebrews in the context of the whole passage where it appears, which goes on to lay out a rather different understanding of what faith entails. You see, Hebrews 11 goes on to look at some of the great exemplars of faith, people who we should look to if we want to see what faith looks like. And the examples it points to are people like Abraham, Moses, and Noah, people who notably had evidence that God existed, either in the form of a burning bush or a voice from the clouds or some other such thing. These were people who had direct and immediate experience of God. So their belief in God, their belief that God existed, wasn't a belief without evidence because they had evidence. And yet, these people are still being presented to us as the ultimate examples of faith. So what was it that made Noah or Abraham or Moses the prime exemplars of faith if it wasn't that they had some kind of blind belief in the existence of God without evidence? Well, here's where the historic traditional Christian understanding of what faith is comes in. For the historic Christian tradition, faith is about a trust in the promises which God has made, a trust that he will fulfill the promises that he's made. And this, I think, is actually very in line with how we commonly use the word faith in everyday conversations. Imagine my roommate came in here right now, and I said, "Oh, roommate of mine, I promise you that I will buy hand soap for our dorm room tomorrow." And he says to me, "Thomas, that's great. I have faith in you. I have faith that you will buy hand soap at the store tomorrow." If he did that, he would be using the word faith to refer to his trust that he has in my promises, that he trusts that I will fulfill the promises that I've made. To give another example, if a citizen of a country says that he has faith in the newly elected president-elect, what he means is that he trusts that this new president-elect will fulfill the promises that he made on his campaign trail. He has faith that this person will fulfill promises. Or to give another example, if a married couple says that they have faith in each other, what that means is that they trust that they will each fulfill the promises that they made to each other when they got married. So we often use this word faith to refer to trust that we have that someone else will keep his or her promises. And this is what the Christian tradition suggests is the religious understanding of faith. Faith is about trusting that God will keep the promises that he's made to us. And since God is all good, we can always trust the promises that he's made because he can't lie. He can't tell a falsity. So religious faith is this act of submitting our trust to God, saying, "God, I trust the promises that you've made." It's not about blindly believing that God exists when we don't have evidence for it or something. Now, at this point, you might be asking another question. You might be saying, hold on, does this mean that we can't actually have faith about the existence of God and that we just have faith about the promises of God? That doesn't seem to make sense. And you're right, it doesn't. We do have faith, or at least we can have faith, in the existence of God. But that doesn't change the fact that faith is fundamentally about what God promises. Because one of the things that God promises is that he exists. So, the Bible, which is full of the promises of God, if there's any thing that's close to a list of the promises that God has made. It's the Bible. Those promises are expressed in different poetic forms, but they're all there. Contains, among other things, the promise that God exists. God says that he exists. That's something he reveals to Israel and to the Christian world. That's something that God has revealed to us. So we can know that God exists by him telling us that he exists. That's one way to know that God exists. But my point here is that that's not the only way to know that God exists. We can also know that he exists through reason. I'm sure when you were in school as a kid, you probably learned about something called Venn diagrams. They're those circle diagrams where they kind of overlap in the middle. What I'm suggesting here is that you have to think of reason and revelation, of reason and faith, as two parts of a Venn diagram. There are some things that you can only know from reason. You can only know, for example, that the earth is round through reason. You're not going to get that from divine revelation. You're not going to get that from faith. And there are other things, like that God is a Trinity, that you can only get from faith. You're not going to find that out just by using your head and thinking about the world. But there's also that category in the middle, things that you can know both by reason and by revelation, which you can know by faith and also by just thinking about the world. And in that middle category are things like the existence of an immaterial, immortal human soul, which was held both by Greek philosophy and revealed in divine revelation. Or the existence of the city of Jerusalem as a real historical fact, which is both not like a controversial piece of history and also part of something the Bible states and God reveals in the Bible. Also, I would say, is included in there the existence of God, which is something that can be discovered both by philosophy and by revelation. It can be held both by reason and by faith. So there's no conflict between holding to the existence of God because of reason and holding to the existence of God because of faith. St. Thomas Aquinas, probably the greatest Christian theologian who's ever lived, began his great work on theology, the Summa Theologica, by offering rational proofs for the existence of God, because he thought it was important to reach out to those who don't already believe that God exists by showing them that there are rational reasons to think that God exists. Yet he still had faith in God because he trusted in everything that the Bible said. So he had double reason to think that God existed, both because of reason and by faith. That wasn't a problem for him because he understood that there could be overlap between what's revealed by God and what is shown from Revelation. And I actually think it's great that there's overlap, and it's great for trying to reach out to people who aren't already Christian. So that's how I would answer the question of whether or not I think that trying to prove God exists prevents people from being able to have faith in God. It doesn't. You can still have faith in God in the sense of trusting his promises, including his promise that he exists, and believe that he exists for rational reasons. Actually, I think it's great to do that because that makes you not just a Christian, but a philosophical Christian, which I think is a very, very great, important combination. Now, before signing off this video, I just want to say one more quick thing first. My longtime viewers might have noticed that the number of videos I've been making has kind of trailed off recently. And the reason for that is right now I'm working on what I hope will be my first real academic philosophical argument, my first real contribution to the academic philosophical world. I'm hoping to kind of establish myself as a real academic philosopher, or at least to start to. It's a long way away. So that's the reason why for the next couple weeks, couple months maybe, the quantity of videos is going to be going down. I'm hoping the quality of videos will stay the same, and I'm hoping you've noticed that maybe the quality of videos has maybe gone up recently, but just know that I probably won't be making as many videos in the next several months. And I appreciate you guys' patience. You're the best. Thanks for watching this video, and God bless.